So a pleasant good evening, everyone. This evening we begin our weekly Bible class, and I have a special guest for you this evening, and that is Dr. Wilton McDonald, all the way from Poland. And so, for those of you who are not aware, Poland is about 6 hours behind the Bahamas. So right now it is 12:30 in Poland. So thanks so much. Welcome, Dr. McDonald, for staying up so late with us as our special guest. So just before we get started, let's begin with a word of prayer. Kind Father in heaven, thank you so much for all that you have done. Let your Holy Spirit guide and direct us as we seek to uncover the word of truth. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So yes, welcome and glad to have you. Can you briefly introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, what you do. Give us some information on your background.
Okay, thank you, Pastor Williams. Well, for those who don't know, my name is Wilton McDonald, and I am a lawyer, an accountant, ex-professor at universities in Cayman, Jamaica. And my focus has always been the law and accounting, business studies, finance, and economics. I do not have a science background, but my main hobby has been centered around science in genealogy and a bit of history. I currently live in Poland. I am a father two, married for 18 years, and I am a proud Seventh-day Adventist and a member of the Adventist Church. And I happen to know Pastor Williams for over 25 years. We attended NCU, Northern Caribbean University, together in the, I would say, the mid or late 1990s. So it's some time ago. So good to be a part of this. And by the way, for those who are from the Bahamas, I was born in the Bahamas many years ago. So I do have an attachment and soft spot for Bahamas.
Very good. Thanks so much, Doc. As you said, we go way back. It's even more than that. I think you came to college at around 1990, 91, somewhere up in there. And so we're over 30 years now, if you look at it from that standpoint. But when we spoke previously, you said you wanted to share some information with us. So can you introduce your topic and then I'll let you take it from there.
Yes, certainly. I certainly wanted to, and my topic is described in the pamphlet, and thank you again, Pastor Williams, for putting that together. Touches on the age of the earth, but more so the age of mankind, of humankind, and as someone who is of color, who has an Afrocentric background. And I consider myself a student of the Bible. I am not a theologian, but I definitely am. I strive to be a student of the Bible. Cannot help but to learn. I'm fascinated with the Genesis story and the account. And my topic is focused on the age of mankind. That is the core of it.
Okay, I'll just turn it over to you. You can take it from there.
And again, thank you, everyone, for those who are joining. And there's something, an image I wanted just to share. I don't know if Pastor can share that image, but it will be very, yes, coming. Okay, it's a very provocative image of a Black man who's seated, I don't know, in some feminine pose on Ebony Magazine. And for those who don't know, Ebony is the premier magazine for Blacks, like Vogue is for the world. It is a fashion magazine, and this is Jonathan Majors, an up and coming Black actor. And I want this image to burn in your minds. And if you get nothing else from the presentation, I wanted it to be a takeaway because as a person of color, as a man, and I am raising and trying to raise the best I can a young boy. Alex is my son, the only son. Uh, and those, so it is that I am my dad's only son. For you who do know Pastor McDonald, who still pastors and shepherds the flock in the Caymans. This will you will understand where I'm coming from. And so the topic here about the age of mankind and why it's so important. Today, we find ourselves at a crossroads, and I've given a little background about myself, about my background in finance and law and economics, and as an accountant. But I have been looking at my own background, historical background, and through genealogy and growing the family tree, which is well over 500,000 members. And I know it's an awful lot. There are tools to assist, but to have a tree that is approaching 540,000 members to have done 8 different DNA tests, it is a growing field. It's a field that has really taken off. A lot of people since COVID, they have been home and they have been really having some time. I wouldn't say a whole lot of time, but people are working from home and not having to commute to the office is time saving. People do have time and they're curious. We live in age, and I don't have to say anything to you. You know it. You see the rumors of wars. I'm in Poland, and next door to me is a war, a conflict, and you have even the U.S. president coming to Poland tomorrow, and each time they visit, there's always some deal on the table, some amount of weapons, and we know weapons are coming through Poland. So this is for me a very difficult time, of course, to be here and to first experience the world with leaping and rising inflation and costs. We are living indeed in uncertain times. So as we sit back and try to figure out what's next, as we wait for Christ to return, I really want us and fellow Adventists to be proactive and to have that first love and joy for religion, for the Bible, for study, for devotion. And I again, I'm not judging, but we parallels are drawing to the Laodicea church. We're a lot of times we're complacent and relaxed in our religion, but this is the time that we need to move out as Adventists and try to really put in motion our faith. So the age of mankind and why it's so important to understand where you're going into the future, even though it's a short future, one that will be cut short positively because of Christ's return, which we're waiting for. It's something that we have to plan towards, and we have to understand. The saying goes, to understand our future, we have to go and appreciate, understand our past. And that's why it's important that we know our past. And what I find that we are truly missing, and I have asked around pastors about the age of mankind. It's impossible to know how old the world is, and I don't need to go into again not from a scientific any background, but when God had created this world, how old it would be the matter? How old is the rock or the tree? How old is this? Whatever God created, it's impossible. Some things today, some trees today in California can grow for 15,000 years or more, 20,000 years, undisturbed. I mean, forest fires are raging in this region, and a lot of trees don't live. But life can go on and can be extended for 20,000 years with just being left alone. How old is something? And this is what confuses a lot of people. when they try to date anything, you find a fossil and encased in rock. And how can you separate what God created from what came about afterwards? It's impossible. And I would never ever go into any topic that deals with the dating of the world. But humankind, how old is just, the men and women who have lived on the earth? And I feel that it is at 6,000 years. There's Uriah Smith. There are persons who have delved into the subject. It seems almost taboo. And I have asked pastors, and they have, been some of them, well, we think it's around 6,000 years. There are specific genealogies in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. There's specific genealogies around 60 to 62 generations. And the span of a generation is different because naturally people lived, and we feel, and I believe that they lived longer, the years of Methuselah, of Adam, in the 900 plus year brackets. And then after the flood event, which is not because of eating meat, but because of the violent conditions, the release of toxic gases naturally after the flood event in BC 2400, that the earth was different, remarkably different. Again, I live in Warsaw, and I bought an oxygen machine, and that has greatly, assisted me. I normally would probably boost my immune system. Oxygen is vital. H2O, and from water you can derive, oxygen. So it is that the world was different. The world was remarkably different after the flood event. And so in Christendom, we believe in this, and it's a ticking timeline. We as Adventists, we have been on the forefront of many things. We have pioneered health, Dr. Kellogg and the early Millerites and the New Start movement. And we all know the acronym, the nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance, air, rest, trust in God. We're pioneers in that. Loma Linda foods and vegetarianism. And we seem to be lagging in this important area. And I put this picture up, and I wanted again to sear the minds and brains of everyone listening, and anyone who could even listen to this presentation, because this is what blacks are portrayed. We no longer are black men portrayed as the thugs or the killers, and just vagrants, or people without means, but now feminized in this fashion, and this is fashionable, with some feminine looking boots and some fluffy attire. I don't know, I mean, if it's a prostitute or a pimp, I don't know. I don't care to know. This is despicable and shocking for a person of color, and to see that we are created, and I feel that we are created, of course, in the image of God. And what does that mean? Well, to be created in the image of God, we have the canon, we have the Bible, and I feel, and I again done some research. I'm not a theologian. I have to qualify what I say. But whatever I say, I am really speaking out as an Adventist, and so the canon that we subscribe to has 66 books, but it isn't really truly complete. We need to delve into it. The original Bible is 80 books, and in 1611, when commissioned by King James of Scotland and England, this is James the Sixth and also the first, because he was both Scottish and English king. 1611. And you look at the Wikipedia page, and I direct you to go to that spot in Wikipedia and look it up. And Wikipedia is open source, but nonetheless, this is what we have to work with. This is our modern day encyclopedia. And if you look at the pages of those persons who were involved in Tyndale and involved in the Bible and the construction of the Bible, you could see that even James himself, he has a white appearance. And it says clearly that the original books of the Bible is number 80, not 60. We know it's 39 and 27 and 66 books, and we know the canon. What about the apocryphal writings, Apocrypha? And the apocryphal writings we know are just like other books like Jasher and Jubilee and Enoch. I have read some of them, and especially Enoch. And for me, what clarifies in a very distinct way, it's when, and I'm paraphrasing that, Enoch, uh, that in the book of Enoch, when it says Lamech, Noah's father, beheld his son, he was astonished. He said, well, this can't be my child. He appears as bright as the angels. And suggestive that, well, Noah is an albino, but Noah was not the original man. There again, skin color comes into play. And all the imagery that you see around the construction of the writing of the Bible, the printing of the Bible, the press, are images of Caucasians. I mean, I grew up when I was many years ago, and images of white Jesus again hanging in on the walls, and we don't question. We no longer, we don't believe in images. We don't put images up, but we can't help but we want to feel that we could display Jesus. And the image of Jesus has changed. Even National Geographic and all these modern day white conventional and scientific boards, they have said, well, the people who lived back then were not Caucasian. They were, olive skin, brown skin. And then we have even sources coming out. We have Russia, which they're engaged in open conflict, but they're releasing images of Black apostles, Black nobles, Black Jesus, Black knights. And we must question and challenge this. There are sources that have been around, essays from Ben Franklin, which says specifically that a number of whites in the world in 1751, when he wrote the essay about rebuilding and remaking America, it was really says the number of whites is proportionably small. It's something that we certainly have to take on board and think and process. So when you look at it, even though the Bible may be stripped of these other books, which the Ethiopians, they have the full set of 80 books. And we know that there have been fragments of different apocryphal writings that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so we have to, again, I respect the canon, I respect it fully, but there are points like in or passages in other books, there's the Enoch, that really help to shape our thinking about race, about how we view the world and this timeline. So I feel from all the work that I've done, all the millions of records that I've composed and I've consolidated, that the Uriah Smith's timeline of 6,000 years, it's not fully accurate because we have to adjust for calendar changes. And we know we have the Gregorian calendar, we have the Roman, we have the Jewish calendars, so many calendars over the thousands of years. But one source that also has stood out in my mind is a book by Dr. Nate Jeanson, which is called Traced. And that book sets out clearly a roadmap of the genealogies from Noah, because the world, of course, we believe it was reconstituted in BC 2400. And he lays out the haplogroups, which is a DNA group, a haplogroup of men from Noah's three sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. E, it's my own group that I'm a part of. It's a very old haplogroup, and so he notes in his book that all of the mutations that has occurred, because the Y chromosome which men carry, women do not have this Y. It's distinct at father, son, in that succession line. Again, the link between men. And the number of mutations is occurred in all the groups over the last 5,000 to 6,000 years. So it is impossible to say that we embrace this evolution theory because mankind, not the earth, mankind would be millions of years old. It's impossible. I have visited old sites. I have been to Orkney, Scotland, very up north, and it's taken a while to go there by plane and train and car and going up north to Kirkwall. And I have visited the sites, the megalithic sites where those stones at Stennis are standing up. They're really tall. And how did this come to be? I mean, how these stones are placed in precision and alignment to the sun and cut, and the mounds that are built, and the people, they're my guides, have no clue. They just say they don't know. They don't know how what these things are. They don't have any explanation. The Neolithic people just up and ran away 2,000 years ago, or they were around 4,000 years ago. But my timeline is firmly fixed within the 6,000 year period. And I feel that that is so important for us because everything that we do now as humans, it will shape our thinking, how we think about ourselves, how we view ourselves. And I feel that what is now being portrayed for Blacks, it's it's not just demeaning. It's sinister. It's evil. I no longer, and I refuse to accept the images and the place in which Blacks and Black men are occupying. And that's why I want to have this image stuck in the back of your minds and tied to this presentation, because this is not where Blacks ought to be. Blacks were dominant in the world from the ancient kingdoms, Egypt. Even today, Egyptians are not secure of their place in the world. And I say that with confidence. They are neither African or Middle East. I don't know who they are and what they are. The images of the Egyptian statues have been defaced. No noses, no bridges. And I cited that. How would that come to be? And they have proof that it has been deliberately defaced. Were these noses too wide, nose and flaring, negroid in features? The English came to Egypt many, many years ago, and they went to India too. We know the East India Company in England ruled with power and authority, big budget for 200 plus years. And in India, they were slicing off the thumbs and fingers of people who were operating the looms, the weaving textile mills. And they were doing things like that in order to control industries and shape. And we know from the Bahamas, even today, because process of law, I'm still not a Bahamian. And after 47 years, when will that happen? When will I be made a citizen? All magically done away with because of English law. And I say that with without any reservation, because they have been able to come and infiltrate and change times, laws, everything. And every country that they have been, we're part of a commonwealth, I know. And whether we remain or not under this current monarchy, which, that's another discussion for another day. But I do feel the impacts, even when I personally I left Bahamas and went to Cayman, there was a moratorium, as they call it, to deprive residents of rights, of abode and rights to citizenship and rights to do anything. And you're left in this limbo land almost every day. And everything, all those, you're like feeling you're persona non grata. And that's how I felt for most of my life. Then I suddenly was just blessed with citizenship in UK because they passed the British Overseas Territories Act in the year 2002. I then turned 27. So how is it benefiting me now? Finally blessed with these rights that I never had for about 27 years of my life when I was utterly stateless, without any citizenship or right to citizenship for 27 years, all because of the beautiful thing. And so you see this creation that we have today, and by process of law, things can be done and undone. I'm challenging and I'm just encouraging you to search for yourselves, to go and visit the original canon, the 80 books, 66 books we know and we subscribe to, but there's more to the Bible. And there's even a passage in the Bible, Revelation, towards the end that says, again, paraphrasing, that if anyone will take and subtract anything out of this book, God will take their name out of the book of life. And if anyone add anything which is not of God, he will add the plagues. It's very clear in scripture. But then the composition of those books, has it been tampered with? We know a lot of deal playing was done in Nicaea, but then in 1611, when we see today the images and imagery of Caucasian, of white people, when the world before the 1600s was just mostly black, even at the time that Ben Franklin penned his essay in 1751, the world was mostly black as he described, and he was not a president for those. Ben Franklin, whose face is on the $100 bill in the States, was a statesman, a scientist. He was a Freemason. He was a lot of things, but not the president. But he was a great man, and his essay, it's really has been out for many years, and people have not taken note. So, with all my studies, with all my research, I can prove and demonstrate that Dr. Jeanson in his book can demonstrate that there were Euro-Africans living, in Europe, around the world, even in the Americas, when a Black Christopher Columbus, and yes, my Facebook page, I have declared a number of things, and I've stated there that the Christopher Columbus was non-white, and he visited the Americas, and he saw people described as Ethiopians, and they were Black. Feathered hair, they were Indians, yes, but Blacks. How do you explain that? Blacks were also there. Blacks were in the New World. Blacks were in Europe, and not just Africa. So being African, it's not, being Black is not confined to Africa. It's not just a story of an African diaspora, but it is a global diaspora that stems and streams out of Africa and touches every part of the world. And those that were white, as again touched by just one book and passage of Enoch, if indeed Noah was born as an albino and he resembled the angels, and that by process of just deduction, the angels were Caucasian, and if the angels truly fell, and by falling, they were humanized, and somehow that DNA was they married women, and giants came about because by visiting these places and which I've done, how were these stones moved? And I believe that they were giants, but they were Caucasian, the Nephilim, as some people refer to them as, and these people were killed during the flood, or during the flood they died, and then the DNA was carried out into the mankind. There are people who became giants, and we saw passages in the Bible where the children of Israel went to Canaan and they saw giants because they were like grasshoppers. And we can't really find the bones of many giants because they miraculously have disappeared. The mounds that I saw with my own eyes in Scotland and Orkney, those were mounds, burial mounds, as one archaeologist has described, but he's been discredited. And they were burial mounds of giants. And they were saying, you know what? There was a history of coming in and out of the mound and taking bones. They will take in animal bones. They will take out other bones. Who knows what bones they actually took out. But if they found conclusive evidence of not just a 9-10 foot person, as we know Goliath may have been 9-10 feet, but someone, Adam, was closer to 18 feet, as scholars would tell us. And if someone was truly a giant, more than 18, probably 25, 30, 40, or 50 feet, that's truly someone who has really, truly a giant, no question. But we can't find today any bones because that would support the biblical record. It would debunk evolution, and it would prove that certainly some books should be given some credit and weight. And this world that we have been living in almost looks like we have been living in the Matrix. We would suddenly wake up that we as Black men and Black people, we're created in the image of God. And I'm not disrespecting any other race. God knows my wife is Polish, my mother is Indian, and the Indians and Caucasians have enjoyed that I would say, close affinity because Caucasians are from the Caucasus Mountains. And that's near Turkey, that's in Asia. And as a story would have it, that when the descendants of the giants who died at the flood, when they were sort of rejected by a lot of African folks, or they think, well, you're born white and you're a freak or something, they were living in Asia, the Caucasus, from Caucasoids, Caucasus Mountains, and Asia, and they moved west into Scandinavia and in England, the Kingdom of Wessex in England, because England had a number of kingdoms like Northumbria, Wessex, and East Anglia. But Wessex in the south was inhabited by Caucasians, and they moved westward in 200 BC before the Roman Empire came to power. That was about 150 BC. And Caucasians moved westward and inhabited the western regions, but the world still was dominated by called Moors or blacks. And that happened around 200 BC when the Silk Road to China was being built. And so today we've had a population explosion, and I have looked at the population stats, and the world was around 0.35 billion in the 1300s, 1400s, 1500s, less than half a billion. And then between the 1600s and 1800s, population of the world went over or close to over a billion. We can't be certain because then, who was conducting the stats, and these people who have now fashioned the world as it is have controlled the data. And bringing it home, why again I'm so certain about the sources which I've posted about this young Earth, according to Dr. Jeanson, where it's 6,000 years old, and he's backing up Uriah Smith and what he had to say about it. And again, further proof with the Gospels. And you can do it. You can go through the Gospels and you can track the genealogies, about 60 to 62 generations between Adam and Jesus. And that brings you full square that there's about 60, 62 generations. And then we have today's modern era. We have 6,000 years. So if you believe that, then certainly blacks are not confined to Africa, and you have a different perspective of yourself. You have a different perspective of life in general, raising kids. And when you see this nonsense on television, I mean, it could be Eddie Murphy or Chris Rock or someone who's apparently funny, no longer funny to me. It's demeaning. In a lot of ways, it's demeaning because we are image and fashion in the image of God. And if you say other races were likened to angels who always serviced God, then I can understand when Lucifer asked to join the Godhead. It wasn't because God was being mean and not wanting, but he was designed a different way. He was not made and designed in the image of God. He was Caucasian. He was different looking person, a being. We talk about this and be practical about it. And Adventists have been very forward. I said in the health message and in the 2,300 year prophecy, we tracked from the building and rebuilding of the temple from the time of post-Babylon captivity and go all the way up to 1844. We have studied prophecy. We have done this and tracked it from Babylon was 600 plus BC. And the time of Babylon to Media Persia and Greece and Rome, we can track these kingdoms. And I did another presentation on Europe and on the 10 toes, knowing that we're living in that period of Europe. And for those who were in Cayman, and when I spoke about Europe and the European presentation about those 10 tribes and 10 toes of Daniel's image, Daniel Revelation, they have passed a number of treaties, and the last one was the Treaty of Lisbon and came into effect 2009. And there's been no real update from 2009. Perhaps it's God that's holding back the winds of strife. And we know that there are wars and brewing, another brewing conflict, World War III on the brink. But there's been no further updates. I checked it and I wanted to fact check. Treaty of Lisbon allowed Europe to function as one separate entity, like you have a separate incorporated company. And I do, as part of my practice, I set up companies, hedge funds every day. The European Union is acting as a separate body with constituent rights as a person, just like a company is separate from its constituent members. And that was done. And I had legal studies, and I went to law school from 1998 to 2001. And my professors were not Christian, they were agnostic. And the amount of learning that I did in European law opened my eyes. There's a roadmap set for Europe. They are trending towards a federally constituted body. And that ties in with the Revelation 17. And when it says about here's the mind with wisdom and the seven, the hills and the mountains and the kings, and there's one king that is not yet come. That passage which grips me in Revelation 17, we should be getting excited about because it talks about the New World Order. And for me, that has not yet manifested itself. They're operating towards, and what they have done since 2009 in Lisbon Treaty is they've been looking at stabilizing acts. They've been trying to bring in the IMF, which has been a bail out entity for countries that are distressed. Jamaica knows it all so well, and other countries around the world. And they have been passing stabilizing economic measures in the last couple of years, but no major ratification to the European Treaty, and it's a Treaty of Rome. The whole European Treaty, it's called, even today, the Treaty of Rome from 1957. So we as Adventists need to wake up as to what is happening, what is going on. There are things that are operating behind the scenes. I don't know what those guys at CERN are doing in Switzerland with their devil dance, because when they introduced CERN, hoping to generate black matter and find out the mystery of the world, maybe open a black hole. What they should be doing is finding a way to bring down the cost of living or something else to help humankind. But they were doing their stuff in Switzerland. That project, no news yet. But in Europe, they're operating on a federative model in political unification, which is not yet. The Vatican qualifies in all respects, but it's a theocracy and needs to be a democracy. But they have let in other countries with weaker criteria. They could pass easily on that one. But notice that we are trending towards the end. And the Jonathan Majors and his Hollywood crew don't do blacks any favors. And I am just taking a stance that I'm really tired, for the sake of all black and brown folk who have been mistreated and downtrodden. We are created in the image of God. And I want to remind you and speak to that. Why is it important to have this timeline of humanity? Why Darwin's theories failed? They're still searching for the missing link. Not knowing that, look, the closest animal to man is a pig. We don't eat pigs, and we don't subscribe to pigs. Maybe that's a form of cannibalism, but the pig is a nasty animal, a foul beast, and most religions don't subscribe. Venice don't subscribe to eating pig. But that's the closest animal. And medical persons have been experimenting on pig flesh for many years, not a baboon, not a monkey. So we cannot give these theories a free pass anymore. And we need to take a very strong stance as Adventists, being proactive, putting our faith in practice and debunk these things. And I have been spending and devoting my time and life to shaping up the genealogy, knowing that my haplogroup, which is E, there's A to E. For those who don't know, there are many letters that goes to Z, but A to E are associated with Africa. So when they saw my haplogroup, they're saying, oh, Wilton, you're E. You and your father, you belong in Africa. I say, I'm black. I don't have a problem with that. But when I put it through the testing, some anomalies came out. My E is younger, and I have first cousins. I've done a posting today. My two first cousins, Greg James and Dave James, they're haplo R. And the battle that's being fought today in genealogy is the R versus the E. The E is dominant. The E is the old haplo of the Jews. All the ancient Jews who now appear white, they are black people, just like most people living on the earth before the 1600s. And before Oliver Cromwell from the UK, he murdered and killed, and they tend to suppress a lot of things. But Oliver Cromwell deported a lot of people, and I've saw the Acts of Parliament where blacks were displaced and they moved out and left and went to the New World, and some ran away and went to New Zealand, Australia. So when I do my DNA testing, I'm matching with people all over the world. Ironically, my mom, who's Indian, has about 200 matches DNA. She has done her DNA tests across 3 platforms. She has 258 matches. Me and my father together, we have 14,000 and growing. And there are anomalies. They're now labeling me as more Indian. I'm supposed to be 60% Indian. Well, if I'm 60% Indian, I am my father's child. My parents are not related. How is it that my dad, who has no Indian DNA or records, my mother will have to be the one to give me that Indian ethnicity or gene? Well, how could she be 120%? How could anyone be 120% of anything? It's impossible. You are 100% of lots of things, but you can't be 120% of one ethnicity. And I keep getting maternal matches, and I am a follower of Y-DNA. Only men can do that testing. Family Tree DNA, by the way, for those who are curious, you could log on to ftdna.com and you can subscribe. You can take your own DNA test. I encourage more Caribbean islanders to take the DNA test, especially men. Men carry the Y-DNA. So when you have men who want to be like women, say to yourself, even my son today, who's 9 years old, you cannot, because genetically, physically, a man carries a Y gene. He gets from his father. A man is different, physiologically different from a woman, and a woman carries both X genes, not the Y chromosome. The Y is basic to a man. So you have to be, again, very strong and committed in what you believe. For me, I will continue my study, my searching, trying to educate more people on their history. The narrative of history is that all persons from black people came out of Africa. They draw out the timeline to 500,000 years. They put into things like Neanderthal man, which for me it's code for Nephilim, but there's a Neanderthal missing link we don't believe in, but they say it existed. And the longer the timeline would be, the more likely black people are just coming from Africa alone, and the whole world is populated by whites. I'm not against, look, I'm all altruist for everyone, and I would like for everyone to benefit and everyone to succeed and get ahead. But right is right. And as a black person, as a person coming from a community of blacks, and we are largely Caribbean-based people, we need to know our history, our station in life, our rights, and knowing that we are from a royal priesthood. And it doesn't mean that, those who are Asian or whites are inferior. I'm not advocating, I'm not preaching that, but we need to know our background and know who we are as a people, and to be confident that we are shaped in the image of God. We have been on this earth for 6,000 years, and we are looking forward to the coming of Christ, and we are united. We have to just be confident in what we believe in, and continue to search the scriptures for truth, the truth about history, and truth about ourselves, and truth about where we're coming from, because then we could make better decisions about our futures, and about how we raise our children and what we teach them. That to me is of utmost importance. So that's the note that I'm sort of leaving off on. I welcome questions. Again, this is a Bible study, and it's a relaxed format. It's not a sermon. But I really want, again, this image for you to reflect on the image that I have here posted of the actor Jonathan Majors. And a lot of other Black actors, Eddie Murphy and others, have been caught in instances where they have utter buffoonery. They have been acting as clowns. And each time they do that, it's taking a piece away from the spirit of a Black man. And I, as a person of color, I'm tired. I'm utterly tired, and I'm disgusted. I come to tears with what they're portraying from Hollywood. And of course, they're pushing the gay agenda. And I have nothing against gays, but as in the Bible, we know of the stories of Sodom and Gomorrah. It's grieving to God's, heart and spirit. To go into this. What's next? Bestiality? For heaven's sake, the trending. You have a movie, a sitcom. There's always a Black person, but there's also a gay person who is portrayed on the sitcom, on the television, the series. And I'm here sitting down with my kids, and I have to explain, well, why is that woman kissing another woman or something? I mean, again, I'm not being homophobic, but they have an agenda that they're pushing on us. And I reflect on this image of a Black man in some feminine boots. I don't even describe this attire and his feathery garb. This is despicable. And it's on the cover of Ebony, our famous fashion Black magazine, reaching the world. And it reinforces the stigma, it reinforces the lies. And there has to be truth. There's help coming around the corner. If you notice what is happening in cinema, it's despicable as the industry is, and I call it Hollywood, not Hollywood, Hollywood. Look what's happening. The movie Orphan Annie, a little redhead girl running around, and we all saw that movie 20 years ago. It was remade, and it's a Black girl, and Jamie Foxx is the father. When you look at the current movie Ariel, and there is a Little Mermaid, always been a red-headed girl. She's now the character role is played by a black girl. I think that, they are, some people object and say, you can't have that. Well, many, many years, decades, you have whites playing the roles of Egyptians. My favorite movie of all, The Ten Commandments and Ben-Hur, it's mostly comprised, and the cast is not of Black people, but of whites. I'm calling a spade a spade. This is how it shapes. Art imitates life, and life is also impacting art. So it's both ways. So art, movies, film, all the media will impact life and how we live and conduct ourselves. And how we conduct ourselves is also projected in art. So don't, there's subliminal waves and things that messages conveyed that you're not even picking up on when you listen to music, when you watch a film or movie, and it's shaping our impressions each day. I mean, a lot of the songs I don't listen to because they pray the masters on these songs. Some singers and artists, it could be Beyonce, and I again did another presentation about that. Beyonce and Jay-Z, they compose songs in minutes. This woman called Sia, she jumped up on a tabletop again, and she composed the whole song with lyrics in 3 minutes. That's not normal. That's not normal. And maybe she has some brilliance or some artistic gift or something. But these people are truly inspired by the devil. Even Jay-Z says, I get in the spirit. And I don't think with his lyrics and bad words and F this and that he's inspired by God. I'm not here to judge. But they do pray in temples, and they do pray on these lyrics and these masters before they're released. So that's what we are subjecting ourselves to. Okay, there's a hand up. Feel free to jump in if you have any questions. I'm near the end of my presentation. It's from John Trotman.
Yes, good evening, and thank you very much for the presentation. I always wonder as to when Seventh-day Adventists are going to address this problem, because, there's a movement right now, and I've been listening to this thing for a little while now. There's a movement right now that is going on about Black people being the true Jews, the true Israelites. I know because of what you're saying, I know that you're familiar with it, and what's going on with it, even with this guy on this picture here. They're trying to demonize Black people. Not only this guy, I've seen it with women. Women, they have this thing called, the movie called Woman King or Female King or something like that. It's like they're trying to do things they're trying to show everything bad about Black people. And, my brother is the first one to bring this thing to me, say, well, they've been lying to us for years, because, when you study the history, you get no history about Black history. All the history is about Europeans. Now, you are correct, because my brother and my cousin showed me this picture about King James. King James is a Black man, and Black people were always all over the world. In Europe, it is even said that the royal family in Europe were Black people, but somehow they're being displaced. And this is a conspiracy. This is a huge conspiracy. I don't know how.
I agree.
That is from the devil himself.
No, but I agree. In order to pull this off, they would have to deploy the new religion, the real religion in this world. I feel it's Freemasonry, and again, there may be people who subscribe to that, but there are things that they do, spooky things that they do. Even I was involved in trying to. I got a license to open up a grave in Jamaica. And boy, I got a warm time, because you don't touch that. You don't open graves. What you want, duppy or something gonna come out on you? But I was trying to prove the link, because there are famous families that died in Jamaica connected to Scotland. And my DNA story, where I'm convinced of it all, that there were Blacks living in Europe. I have first cousins, and those James, Greg and Dave, their dad is from St. Elizabeth. No, the St. Elizabeth people are bright, but they are of the haplogroup R. So they're the European modern haplos. But when they put a date on their DNA, it's about 1900 years. It's 1,000 years more and older than my DNA. Me and my father's DNA is around 900 years. It's firmly linked to Scotland. And there were a lot of Blacks who came to the New World, and there were no masters with that name. Yet they want us to believe that, all the Blacks, they came and they got their names from master. Well, if the Blacks came and there are Blacks living and they adopted, yes, people adopted names. And these people had their names from wherever they could remember. A lot of Caribbean people don't have links, and the records
They changed
are
the names. Slavery, they changed all the slaves' names. They changed the names of the
I
slaves.
do know that they changed names even on before the ship, before they brought them, because even the time of prohibition, when slavery was abolished, they were changing. There's even the movie on Amistad, and that was based on true events. But they have many cases where they changed the names, even the name of the ship, because they were running contraband. The slaves, it was during the times of abolition, and they were still dealing with slaves. My thing is, I have so many records, and I manage 45 DNA kits. I'm convinced of the European African story, that my roots and my most distant relative indeed lived in Scotland. And it wasn't a guy who was redheaded and wearing a kilt or dress or whatever they wear there. It was a Black person. The Picts, the African Picts, the early Scots were Black. The Hebrews, and to your point about Black Israelites, the original Israelites, because remember, the Jewish people have been living in so many countries. They've been living in all over the world. They never had a home until after the World War II, and they were given a homeland. I mean, that's a subject of controversy for another day. But there were Black Hebrews living in Scotland, and the early Picts Picts, lived in the UK, lived in Scotland. They were black. A person who observed them, one person called Tacitus, he was a Roman, he was a lawyer, a historian. He was born in AD 50 after Christ died. And as I said, dates are important and they must matter. Tacitus observed with his eyes even the building of Hadrian's Wall. And that wall was built to wall off Scotland because Rome tried to conquer that part and they lost legions. There's even again another movie, The Eagle, that is portraying those events and the barbarians. But they were black, but they were painted people, they were white people, but they wore tattoos. Now, the books of Tacitus, more than half of those books are missing. I kid you not. I know they won't be in English language, but they are not available. Just like the books that are describing George Washington are calling the Colonel Washington the Huguenot. A lot of the books are not in print. They're not available. So George Washington, who knows what color he was? Who knows color? We know Abraham Lincoln and what was said about him being black. But there are a lot of persons of worth. There are books. John Mackay, an Englishman in 1700s, he wrote a book on the memoirs of Secret Service of, he was a spy, a Secret Serviceman, a lawyer in 1700s England, and he observed blacks coming to court. There's another book by Oxford professor Miranda Kaufman called The Black Tudors. The Tudor age was from the 1400s to early 1600s, the time of King James, and even Charles I, who lost his head. And lost his head because Oliver Cromwell, the same demon of a person, Lord Protector, who deposed and murdered the king, Black King Charles in England in the 1600s, he deported blacks. He took away the lands, he just deported them. And this is the history. This is the real history that no one is talking about. So
Yeah,
the world was black.
They don't want us to know. They've been lying to us for years. And that's the reason why, even, I mentioned something before, even in the church. I said this picture they show of Jesus, this white guy with his blue eyes and so on. I have a problem with that because I mentioned it before. Why are we showing our children? Why are we having pictures of this drawing in our books about Christ?
I will tell you this.
These pictures.
Yeah, no, but I must say, because I know the picture with the noble look and this beard and white face. I did some research. There was a Pope, Pope Leo, one of the Catholic popes.
That's his son, Shaba Boucher.
The son that took the picture from his thieving, whoring son.
Yes.
And they took that image and plaster it on the face of Jesus. So that's where that image is coming from. And it's a despicable.
I know that too. And that's why I mentioned it before. Because this guy, well, it was said that he's homosexual and all of that. The Pope of his son.
He was a person of low morals. He was a person of low morals. A Pope's son, and they took the image and cast the image of Jesus, and they have gone with it, gone global, viral
and
with
it. We use that when children are praying. They got this picture from whenever they know themselves. When they're praying, they'll have this image in their mind while they're praying. This is wrong. I don't think that we should have this image in our church. We should get past that. We know the truth. But we know that man is not Christ.
Russia is an old country, thousands of years old, the old Rush, and they've been disclosing these images and paintings of black apostles, a black Christ, a black Mary, and black knights, because knights, and the word even knight, where they were operating under cover of night. The knights that were crusading, fighting, were black. And we lived in a black world. And the words of Ben Franklin, he was very clear when he said, the Swedes, the Russians, the Finns, all the people in the world, the Italians, the French, they were black. He said that in his essay, 1751. He was very clear. And one thing with the certain Masons, they put things out in the open. They put it in, say, clear sight. But he announced that, and we can't even put two and two together. He was describing the whites, and America should be prepared for a land. America should be a place where whites would be allowed to flourish. So it's believed that Ben Franklin himself was one of the few whites that came on the ship. Do you know that even the people who entered the New World, when they came off the ship, they were considered white based on where they came from? So if they came from Europe, and a newly constituted Europe, after Oliver Cromwell and his minions cleansed Europe, murdered, and the Jacobites and those, just cleansed them, because my McDonald's and old McDonald's, Jacobites and those were cleansed and murdered, and those the Scottish murders, though from Europe was reconstituted. So when you came from Europe and you went to America, you would be marked as white, even if your skin tone was black. The Racial Integrity Act, that in 1925 started to classify people as octoroon, quadroon, mulatto, 1925. Before that, they did not have such racial classification, and people were still making description, calling these folk that we laud up today, like George Washington or kings of Scotland, as swarthy, swarthy, and dark complexion. Um, Sometimes they would refer fair or ruddy, but generally it was swarthy. Swarthy is black. Swarthy is black, and that was a complexion. So we this is not a thing about just pro-black and or pro-Israelite, pro-Hebrew. This is pro-truth, and you can't wash that away. This is pro-truth. That's what we are. And if we have to take up the full books of the Bible, because there are 80 books that were actually commissioned by King James, and only 66 made it into the final canon. Today, the Ethiopians embrace all 80 books, 80. Then certain books were deemed, and this is even after the Council of Nicaea. So this is now 1600s, where certain books were excluded from the canon because they offended certain races, and they wanted to construct this world with the Freemasons, with the East India Company, which was a huge governmental, extra governmental. The East India Company was massive. They employed more people than even the British government employed. And they formed what we know today as the world. And to me, this is probably one of the greatest deceptions that has been, you say you've been hoodwinked. One of the greatest deceptions ever. Our history, our Black history, and how we look at the world. When my daughter looks at a beauty magazine, do you know one of the largest drinking group in the world? It's middle-aged white women. They have, this is a counter to all of that. They have lauded up, they put the white woman on the pedestal. The people in the States were killed even for whistling and catcalling, white women. We know there's made a story of that boy, who was mauled.
Yes.
They put on a pedestal the biggest drinking group in the world of alcoholics. It's middle-aged white women. The stigma, even the beauty magazines, that again, I look and personalize, my daughter will pick up, those people don't look like that. All the retouching and the photoshopping, they do not look. And we know Blacks keep their complexion, their skin, their tone, their teeth, less wrinkles. This is the gift from God, because we are shaped in the image of God, not to be paraded like this moron on the cover of Ebony, and to be called a criminal or a thief, and a person have to hug their handbag because Black man is going to come and take your money. I mean, this is the images that's been burnt in the brains, and on the magazines, beauty standard has been whitewashed. So a lot of the paintings, and you ever notice that you have a famous painting, they generally have one copy. You name any famous person, a king or something, you have one copy. Then when you look at the coins that have come about, the coins themselves don't really match the image. So the coinage This is the buttons. They had buttons too, and coins and brooches, with big, large brooches. They don't, and they're like, why would they create a brooch of a Negro-looking woman? Did she love her slave too much? No, you uninformed person. No, they created that, and they have blackheads on crests and family mottos and stuff because were black. They were people who were not glorifying a slave. They were black, and we should be proud in our blackness. We have thicker lips, we have broader noses. The images in Egypt would have been the same, but we don't know that because they were defaced. They were deliberately defaced, and it
Yeah,
pains my
it is not
heart.
hard. It is not hard to believe and accept that the Egyptians were black because I mean, even from the Bible standpoint, when Jesus and Joseph and Jesus and Mary went down to Egypt, how could they fit in a society if they were white and everybody else was black? Everybody had to be the same complexion, same color. And because Egypt is not, even Jerusalem, even Israel, Morocco, and all those places, is not Africa. And all those places were black people. Now, even in the American Indians, it was said when Christopher Columbus went there, he met the American Indians are really black people.
Ethiopians. There were people described as Ethiopians, yes.
The same
And
thing, the same thing in Australia. They are really black people. These people traveled from Africa and they went all over the world.
and the way that you get around these lies and debunk the lies, and there are more people signing up with their DNA stories. They are putting their evidence out there. They're not getting the results, but they are putting a nail in the coffin. As I tell a lot of my brothers and sisters, sign up, do your DNA test. You may not get the results you expect, but each time a new person comes, it's helping to debunk that lie, and the lie about this protracted time frame we've been on the earth as humans for millions of years or hundreds of thousands of years, and they can't prove anything. They can't show you a civilization that lived, say, 10,000 years ago. They said the Neolithic people from Orkney, and I visited that place myself, the Kirkwall, they disappeared. Oh, they were around 5,000, 6,000 BC, but they disappeared. But where did they go to? And how do you explain these things? How do you explain these stones that were cut by laser precision? I visited places like Easter Island, where the Muis, who moved all the big rocks, who chiseled them, and the quarry sites are 40 miles or more away. How is that possible? So we have to put everything in context and together when we read things that the children of Israel, they left Egypt, they went to Canaan land, and they were like grasshoppers. You read a text like that and you think that it is not accurate. How can you read a text like that and not think that there were actually giants? And where did the giants come from? Where did whites come from? Where fell into place? We have to know our history, and the timeline is one way to get a confirmation of faith. It's a boost of faith, and to really impact your lives and that of yourself and the next generation. Because I'm tired of sitting in the back of the bus. I'm not talking figurative, but mentally and figuring in the back of the bus, because we are from a royal priesthood, and there is so much gathering evidence of that. And why is it today that a lot of the whites and Caucasians who we sometimes envy, oh, he's a billionaire and he has that amount of money? Well, no one's gonna get $1 billion like that. It doesn't happen that way. The devil offered God a whole lot of money to just bow down and worship, and that's happening today. You join a club, whatever special club you join to get your money, and you're in. That's you and your salvation. That's you and how you've done to get it. But a lot of the whites and people, well, mimicking the fallen angels, that they're creating an image of God. We as brown people, black people, we're creating an image of God. We need to understand what that means and put it in practice. So again, I'm not here to debunk or cry or put down any race, but to uplift. So to being pro-black and about our race and ethnicity It's about furthering, just like the NAACP. It's supposed to be a national association for the advancement of colored people. And it's not one for putting down another race, but to uplift your own, my own. That's my goal in life. If I can pull it off to inspire as many people to read, to search for themselves, and to do a simple DNA test, because that DNA test will again help to shatter the lies that's out there, like living in the matrix.
Thank you so much, Doc. It's quite interesting discussion. I think it was interesting with the back and forth, but we're going to have to close off now. So I want to thank you. Remember, each Sunday at 6:30 p.m., we'll be right here discussing some topic related to the Bible, scripture, etc. In this case, he was approaching more from a historical as well as contemporary standpoint. He was bringing the two together. But we will have to close. So I'm going to close with a word of prayer. Father in heaven, thank you so much for all that you have done. Let your Holy Spirit guide and direct us in all things. Be with us through our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I ask in his precious name. Amen. We'll see you next Sunday, everyone. Remind us on Thursday at 6:30. Good night. Go to bed, my friend. God bless you.
Good night. Good night. Thank you. Thank you all.